So, the evolution of surgery. We've all heard the term survival of the fittest. That's what scientists have been using to sum up evolution. We need to adapt in order to survive. However, sometimes the answer lies in medicine and not our own biology and evolvement. The evolution of practice of surgery is just as essential to survival as is our own biological evolution. In order to understand this, we need to ask ourselves, what has surgery contributed to our survival and how has it progressed? In order to measure our progress, we have to look at the past and see where we came from and see where it all started. Evidence of surgical necessity appeared as far back as 31,000 years ago. On the island of Bosnia, an adult underwent a left leg and foot amputation. And Dr. Block of the University of Sydney was invited to study the remains after their discovery and was astounded at the fact that the patient not only survived the surgery for a few years afterwards, but the cut was clean and there was no signs of infection, meaning that we had some basis of an idea that surgery was necessary in order to save one's life even 31,000 years ago in the Stone Ages. Now, sometimes surgery isn't as simple as cutting off a limb or stitching together a piece of skin. Sometimes it's more invasive, and that leads us to the discovery of 120 skulls off of France in a cave. And Paul Braca was invited to study those remains, and he discovered that 40 of those 120 skulls that were found had holes. Those holes today we call trepidation, and those holes are used to alleviate cranial pressure of a patient. And even back then, 6500 BCE, it was still a vital part of saving someone's life given certain circumstances. Now, fast forward a little further, now that we have some context of how long surgery has been around, we need to discuss and ask ourselves, well, yeah, it's great that we found a way to save patients through removal of non-viable limbs and brain swelling. However, how do we regulate surgeons? How do we protect patients from going through the unimaginable? And the unimaginable is hurting patients, the surgeons hurting patients. That very issue, along with many other ethological and management issues from across various fields, gave way to Mesopotamians' code of Hammurabi, which would be the first form of protection against malpractice. The artifact with the famous eye for an eye inscription is on display at the Louvre, and I've been fortunate enough to see this twice in my life in person, and it truly is a testament to how far we have come in history and how patient safety has always been a vital part to being successful within surgery and within civilization. Now that we have forms of surgery, both invasive and non-invasive, we have yet another advancement in the surgical field in the 1540s. Moving into the Renaissance and the Middle Ages, European barbers, hair barbers, was also your local surgical center. And that gave way to barber surgeons and the Barber Surgeon Society in London. And it was a way for you to get your haircut, a shave, and surgery all in the same place. But again, advancements, but there's limitations there. We have regulation, multiple ways of conducting surgery through various parts of the body, and a society formed based on surgeons. What's the next obstacle that we have? What's the next step in progress? Well, unfortunately, that was anesthesia. We didn't have it. Every patient felt every knife cut and every part of that surgery before, during, and after. That would not be solved until William Morton discovered anesthesia, which they dabbled with nitrous oxide and other things before this, but still, patient safety was an issue. He may have discovered it in 1842, however, it wasn't until 1846 that Morton and Dr. Collin of Mass Gen underwent the first successful surgery using anesthesia on a patient. And that segued into not only local anesthesia, general anesthesia, the advancements went on from here as far as protecting a patient during surgery. Now that we have an understanding of why we need surgery, which is to save patients from unnecessary ailments and premature death, and we have anesthesia and regulations, we need to go further. What more can we do? How can we take the next step? That leads to the question, how can we look at damage that's not surface level? Wilhelm Röntgen accidentally gives us that ability in 1895, and M. Tubiana wrote an article for the National Library that dives into this accidental discovery, which I'll link. However, this discovery could now allow us to see inside a patient and create a plan for a surgical procedure with images before we even make the first cut. Wilhelm's discovery, we can now segue into treatment through these invisible waves, and that led to Lars Lascelles' gamma knife, which was the first form of radioactive surgery in a way. We could take pituitary tumors and shrink them with this machine. Revolutionary. Now, going back a little bit from the gamma knife invention, we segue into the next issue we have is how can we keep patients alive after surgery? They're still dying. Why? Well, infection. And infection took maybe another 200-300 years to solve, because in 1928, Alexander Fleming would discover penicillin, and penicillin revolutionized the way we can treat patients afterwards, and that gave birth to antibiotics. Now that we have anesthesia, antibiotics, society, malpractice protection, and a long history of surgical procedures, what's now the issue? Well, the 21st century, we've progressed as far as surgeons. However, we have limitations, and the size of our hands being the biggest limitation. We need to be able to get into smaller, tighter spaces and be able to do more so we could do more invasive surgeries and help more patients. The 21st century, the Da Vinci machine was created in the year 2000 to solve that issue. Throughout the last 25 years, advancements to the machine have been introduced. Elizabeth Goh of Oxford Academic uses the term mechanical knight to describe the revolutionary device that was created by Frederick Mull and his team at the Intuitive Surgical Group. And now we can go in between tissues, in between muscle and other forms of organic matter within the body, and stitch them together, separate them, cauterize, and save patients' life on a deeper level. Evolution of surgery is truly mind-blowing, and I can only say we've only got more advanced. But the real question is, things like the Da Vinci machine and other artificial intelligence becoming more apparent in our day-to-day, how is that going to affect the surgical procedures and surgical field going forward? Is it going to help us, limit us, or replace us?